Yeah. We had an article in Bloomberg. It was talking about, it was talking about that it seems that Zelensky's victory plan is not working. Nobody's considering this plan, and they were talking about that the NATO countries are putting some sort of pressure on Zelensky to go after negotiations. And on the other hand, we had this talk on the part of Stoltenberg. He was talking about the way that they're gonna continue the conflict in Ukraine.
Can change President Putin's mind, but we can change his calculus. So if the price he has to pay on the battlefield is too high, then he may be willing to sit down and agree a solution where Ukraine prevails as a sovereign independent nation. And to get there, we need military support Ukraine, because that's the only way to convince President Putin that they will not win on the battlefield.
Yeah. Can you put both of them together? I don't understand. Russian, how do they think right now about what's going on in the West? Because mixed messages are coming out.
Have you ever gone to Las Vegas?
No.
But you know a lot. In Brazil, there are casinos. Right. So you know the concept of gambling.
Yeah,
and
I
you know that the odds are in favor of the house. That's why they have big buildings with fancy carpets and big chandeliers and all that kind of stuff. Because in the long run, you're not going to make money at a casino. The odds are in favor of the house. When you take a look at NATO and Russia and Ukraine, and you just put everything on the table, in the long run, Russia will win this conflict 100% of the time because of all the factors that could be brought in. NATO was gambling that because I can go to Las Vegas. I can put $500 in my pocket and walk around and play the craps table and wait till I'm up and then leave with a little bit of profit, go there, wait till I leave. If I lose a little bit, walk away, and I can manage it. And I may get lucky enough to walk out with more money in my pocket than I came in with. But it's not going to happen a lot. It's a gamble that's going to happen. NATO gambled that they were going to be able to put all this resources into Ukraine to create this proxy that would have that would create a resource problem for Russia. They were also gambling that they could combine the military pressure with the economic pressure, that they could sanction Russia and get the economy to break. And they were gambling that the economy would cause the political will of the Russian people to collapse, and that the confluence of military defeat, economic disaster, and loss of political support would lead to Putin's demise. All right, that's like me walking into a casino and saying, I'm going to simultaneously play blackjack, roulette, and craps, and I have to win on all three, and in order to make money. It's stupid. Never was going to happen. Anybody with a head on their shoulders would have known that the sanctions were hell. I wrote about it in December of 2021. Detailed paper said exactly what was going to happen, and you know what? Everything happened the exactly way I said. Why? Because it had to. The reality of Russian energy and the pricing, the scope and the scope and scale of Russia's engagement with Europe, that you can't walk away from that, re-engage, and expect to make money. It was inevitable that the European economy was going to collapse because of the blowback from the Russian sanctions. What wasn't inevitable was that Russia was going to succeed to the level they did. Even I didn't predict that. What I said is that Russia would be able to manage its economic difficulties better than Europe would, that Europe would collapse before Russia collapsed. What I didn't predict is that as Europe collapses, Russia says, screw it. We're going to expand. We got this under control. Russia's thriving today. Thriving. I've been there. I'm just telling you. It's not just Moscow and St. Petersburg. It's all of Russia. It's an economic boom. It's, people are employed. They have good standards of living, quality of life, infrastructure, all the things that the West claims Russia doesn't have, they have. Yeah, they got flushing toilets too everywhere. It's just crazy, the stupidity in the West. But we didn't predict that, but it did. On the military, there was no way this was ever going to work. First of all, understand this: that NATO is a paper tiger. They have some militaries. If you've learned anything, taking a force out of garrison. It's one thing for the Poles, for instance, to say, we have this many troops. Sure, they're all in garrison, right? And You've been working on maintaining your equipment, haven't you? And you've gone to the field a couple times, right? Now take them all out of garrison, march them, and take them, project them 100 kilometers into Western Ukraine. And if you haven't practiced that, you're going to die, because that's a completely different game. Now you're in the field. You don't get to go back to your maintenance facility to maintain. You have to have field maintenance. Have you practiced that? Do you have the spare parts? Do you have the fuel? Do you have the ammunition? Do you have the ability to protect that line of communication? Do you have the ability to communicate amongst your troops? All the things that if you don't do, you fail. Russia's been doing it now for gosh, 2.5 years, more. They know war better than anybody. See, the Ukrainians used to know war, but this is the 3rd time their army's been destroyed. They're creating a 4th time, and you were talking about bringing in people with no military training. You know what the Russians do better than anybody? Kill. You know what the hardest thing is to train a soldier in peacetime? To kill. There's a book called On Killing, written by, I can't remember the author, an American author. He talks about in World War II, you know, with all the fighting, soldiers don't know how to kill, and they don't want to kill. That the vast majority of people just fired their weapon and the bullets went whenever they went. Very rarely did you get a guy who actually aim and take people out. It takes a while to condition somebody to take a human life. The Russian army right now kills without hesitation, not indiscriminately, but without hesitation. They go head to head with a NATO force full of people who have never killed anybody, don't know what it's like to be shot at. It's like boxers, you know. It's not just about you punching somebody; it's about somebody punching you. And you got to not only be able to deliver a punch, but you got to be able to take a punch. You got to know how to manage the fight. Russia knows how to manage this fight. NATO doesn't. Militarily, NATO is never going to be able to impose its will on Russia. Russia was always going to be able to adjust. It has better resources. It's fighting on interior lines of communication. So militarily, this was never going to end well for NATO. They were gambling that they could achieve localized military success for a brief period of time, which, combined with economic collapse and political chaos, could lead to a result. The economy didn't collapse, so Russia never felt that pressure. And the Russian people, again, if you study history, you'd know that this is a guaranteed outcome, have rallied around their government. There's more support for this conflict today than there has been at any time. And the Russian military is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So this is the reality that Europe, the United States, and everybody is facing. You aren't going to change this. You went in and you gambled. We're now 2 years into somebody sitting at the casino putting good money after bad. We are so deep in the hole right now that we could win for a year and never recover. And we're not going to win for a year. The more you gamble, the more desperate you get. The less you focus on the odds, and you're just going for that one miraculous thing, the storm shadow. Just give me the storm shadow. Give me the ATACMS. Give me the F-16. Give me something that will miraculously change the reality, which is Ukraine has lost. There is no Ukrainian plan for victory. Everybody who's looked at it laughs at it, says it's a joke. Isn't going to happen. Nobody's going to support this. Nobody is supporting it. Ukraine has lost this war. The West is adapting to this reality. There are political leaders who have invested so much political capital into the notion of defeating Russia that they can't back down. But guess what? The foundation that put them into power and holds them into power is collapsing. Look at Germany, Olaf Scholz. Compare and contrast statements he's making today with what he said a year ago in 2023, when he was literally Adolf Hitler. We're going to march into you. We're going to do this. Today, we're not sending you Taurus. We're not supporting this stupid plan. We're not going to do any of this. Why? Because Germany is falling apart. Scholz is looking at the results. He's a politician. Politician's job is to get reelected. And he's looking at the reality of the German electorate, and he's saying, I ain't getting reelected, especially if I continue with this stupid war, which is destroying our economy and making us look foolish around the world. Complete 180. Other nations like the Czech Republic, they got a president, former military officer, NATO guy. We're strong, we're strong, strong. Yeah, the Czech people went, no, we're not doing this. Slovakia, same thing. Hungary, boom. Europe's starting to fall away. France, even Macron, who, again, just 6 months ago, were sending the French Foreign Legion into Ukraine. I said, no, you're not. And no, he didn't. Can't. There's nothing there. But now he's saying we have to talk with Russia. Saying this war will end, and when the war ends, we have to talk with Russia. We have to repair this. okay, the war will end, but it's not going to end on terms favorable to Ukraine. In fact, Ukraine won't exist when this war ends, not as it currently configured. Zelensky, he's another person like Netanyahu that we just have to wait for Zelensky to disappear. And I think he will disappear sometime in the not so distant future because his political relevance, his political viability is nil. And when they replace him, somebody will come in and have to accept the reality that peace will only come by terms dictated by Russia. The West is recognizing that. They're trying to, mitigate the terms that Russia will impose, but they're going to be harsh. Demilitarization, denazification, hopefully the end of Banderist ultranationalism. This cancer on not just Ukraine but Europe and the world needs to be, for once and for all, have a spike driven through its heart. And permanent neutrality. Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. Whether it becomes a member of the European Union is another question. It doesn't qualify, and it's not going to qualify for decades. What it could become is a member of a political economic union with Russia and Belarus, and have a chance to get some viability back. But we'll see what the future holds. But there is no Zelensky peace plan. It doesn't exist. It's in his imagination, but nobody treats it seriously.
Yeah. Last time we talked about that meeting between Starmer and Biden, you mentioned that you don't know who has changed the Biden's decision not to send long-range missiles to Ukraine. Then later on we learned it was Pentagon decided to do that. But who did that, Scott? In your opinion, it was Lloyd Austin, and what information they've received based on those information they have decided not to send long-range missiles to Ukraine?
Well, Lloyd Austin had already made this decision based upon assessments from the Pentagon. I think September 6th, I could be off on that date, he went to the 24th iteration of the Ramstein Contact Group. That's where they all get together, the Americans, the Europeans, the Ukrainians, and they talk about what's next in terms of supplying support. And at that time, Zelensky had come in making a heavy pitch for U.S. permission to use ATACMS and Storm Shadows. And Austin said, no, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. And he said something else. He said, this war is going to end through negotiations, not by, applying, magical weapons. So that was a big no. And one of the reasons is that it was escalatory in nature, needlessly provocative, and not going to change the outcome. But that appeared to be policy coming from the Pentagon. Apparently, the State Department had different point of view. Tony Blinken now is flying or not taking a train to Kiev, and he's saying the whole time, our policy is that Ukraine will win this war. And the president's saying, we'll win this war. And remember, the definition of victory is strategic defeat of Russia, which, given the fact that Russia is a nuclear power, strategic defeat means you'll automatically trigger their nuclear doctrine and the world ends. So it's a stupid suicidal policy to begin with, but that's our policy, the defeat of Russia, victory for Ukraine. And he and his the foreign secretary of England go to there. And again, the press, remember, the press doesn't invent stuff all the time. On occasion, they're told, what's going to happen. And the press the gaggle that's following these guys was told that Blinken and Lammy are going to sit down and they're going to give the green light for Ukraine to use these weapons. And Ukraine fully expected that. And then Blinken comes out and gives some wishy-washy language about now's not the time, we're not going to do this, or because I think Austin went to the White House and said, what are you doing? And so then the president said, Jake Sullivan came in and said, this will be handled by executive decision, because we got the Pentagon, the State Department, they're not talking with each other, policy disconnect. The White House is going to take this over. Jake Sullivan in charge. And Keir Starmer now is going to fly to New York to Washington, D.C. and meet with Biden at the White House. And Keir Starmer comes off with his red briefcase. It's got all the plans and everything. Remember, Zelensky and the British had already worked out the targeting. Zelensky had the targets. He was trying to sell the targets. The British had the targets. Remember what I'm saying. The British had the targets. What's that tell the Russians? Who's attacking what? It's the British attacking them using American intelligence. That's what the Russians said all along. But he came in, the whole thing was Russia's bluffing, Russia's bluffing, Russia's bluffing. And Biden was ready to do on this. He was told, this is what we're going to do. Sullivan told him everything okay. The Russians are bluffing. They all heard Putin speak on Thursday night, and they went, he's bluffing. Suddenly you have the ambassador, the Russian ambassador to the United Nations in session at the Security Council of the United Nations, basically say this will be a declaration of war. He said that to the world. And now Biden's like, well, what does that mean, declaration? I don't. And then Anatoly Antonov says, if you think you can avoid nuclear conflict and limit it just to Europe, think what I'm just saying right there. If you think you can avoid a nuclear conflict and limit it just to Europe, you're wrong. You will get burned. Your fingers will get burned. And now they're going, what does that mean? And so the White House calls its intermediaries, all the former government officials who, because they're not in government, maintain some sort of, casual connectivity with the Russians. And they all call Anatoly Antonov and say, what do you mean by that? He said, what do you think I mean? The president's word were quite clear. Don't play with fire. And they all start calling Sullivan saying, this is a problem. The Russians aren't bluffing. They appear to be serious about this. And Biden had to pull the plug on signing the documents. I personally believe there was also a back channel, probably through the Pentagon, maybe through the CIA, maybe through both, where the Russians, let me give you an example. If you remember back in the fall of 2022, when Ukraine launched its big counterattack in Kharkov, and the Russians fell back and they recaptured Kherson, everybody in the West was saying Russia's going to use a nuclear weapon because they're so desperate to, total misanalysis. But they said Russia can use a nuke. The United States used the back channel to Russia. And they didn't just say, don't do it. They said, if you do it, this will happen. We will strike you using conventional weapons, but it'll be a massive strike designed to, destroy communications, logistics, command and control. We're coming in hard. It's a guarantee. We're not going to nuke you. But if you use nuclear weapons against Ukraine, NATO is going to hit you hard conventionally, and this is how we're going to do it. I think the Russians went, thanks for that intelligence. We weren't planning on nuking them anyways, but hey, that's your thing. But my point is, this channel isn't just about issuing soft warnings. The channel is about issuing very detailed warnings. And I have a feeling that the Russians went to him and said, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. I don't know what they were going to do. I don't think it was going to be nuclear. I think it was going to be conventional, but I think it would have been involved strategic weapons, avant-gardes, Kinzhals, zircons. I was in I did I guess it was a space, as they call it, on X. And the deputy ambassador to the United Nations for Russia, Mr. Ambassador Polyansky, was there. And I postulated my theories about Russian doctrine, et cetera. And he said, look, I can't talk about it for obvious reasons. But he said, I will tell you right now that you won't get any disagreement from any Russians about what you just said. So I feel comfortable with what I'm saying. I think the Russians made it clear that there would be consequences. And the problem is, once you get into this tit for tat, because if Russia then, you remember how the NATO said we're going to hit Russia hard with conventional? I think Russia came back and said we're going to hit you hard with conventional. And then what happens? Article 5 is triggered. And Putin already said, he told Macron, he told everybody else, once NATO triggers Article 5, we're at war. And it will go nuclear. 72 hours later, we're all dead. So I think that's what happened.